Hi ladies, and welcome back to Healing the Wounded Feminine series. We are in the root part of this series, and today I'm going to teach you how to identify dysfunctional patterns in your family history and in your life that manifested trauma connected to your feminine energy. And to understand this, we need to first question and reflect on the relationship we have with our sexuality. We were born out of this act, so everything is connected to our sexuality, especially when it comes to healing deep root traumas. And when we inherit DNA, we don't only inherit body defenses, but we also inherit an emotional blueprint. So if our parents had a repressed sexual energy or a type of sexual addiction, we are going to inherit their patterns, and we're going to need to heal from their patterns. And we are in this root series. And our root, our genital area, the base of the spine, our reproductive system. This is what we are meant to heal, because ultimately, most of our pains are coming from our sexuality. And this, we can notice it at a really young age with this gender separation. And unconsciously, little girls grow up with the impression that being born as a female, it's a weakness, and they're gonna need to do so much more effort than men to be accepted in society. And this is really true, because even in our own language, for instance, I'm sure you have heard someone say, "Don't cry like a little girl." And this is really common. Don't cry like a little girl. So there's this inferiority, right, of the woman body and this superiority of the male body. And this is a deep suffering, just as we've seen with this woman pain body. This is a suffering that is coming up for us at a really young age. And for instance, I remember a group of guys really encouraged me when I was younger. I was 10, 11 years old, encouraged me to fight with a little boy of my neighborhood. And because there was such pressure on me, I felt like, in a way, I needed to prove myself. And I needed to fight this little boy to prove that I was strong enough, which I did. And it turned out that I broke the nose of this little boy and I won the fight. And then these little boys started screaming, "Oh, you got beat by a girl." And this sentence, "you got beat by a girl," just as it was a big humiliation to be beat by a girl, because a girl is weak. So if you get beat by a girl, that means that you are weak too. And this is really in the imaginary of the collective. This is really present in the collective. And this language is serving to still perpetuate these differences between genders and the superiority of men over women. I share a bit of my own story in the first video. So if you haven't watched my first video, I truly encourage you to stop watching this video and watch the first video, because it's really important to understand the whole process of this series. I was sexually abused by my neighbors at 9 years old. And this sexual abuse started by my neighbors introducing me to a porn video. And they found this porn video in their parents' stuff. And I actually continued this cycle, because after this sexual abuse, that wasn't just one time, but different times. But my entire life, I never considered it as abuse, because I thought that I wanted it. I thought that I was responsible for what happened to me. And I continued this cycle because I also looked in my mother's stuff to find a porn video, and I started to watch porn and masturbate at 10 years old. So imagine the lack of sexual education. Because if from the very beginning I had a mentor, a parent, a caregiver who would have told me how important it is to preserve my body, how no one was allowed to touch me inappropriately. Imagine how my life would have been different by hearing this from parents that I trust. Instead, I remained silent and I started masturbating. And actually, by masturbating, I was reopening these wounds and I was totally unconscious of it. This overstimulation of my genital area, it was actually a call for help because this part of my body, my root chakra, needed some healing. And this was my way, unconsciously, because this is the only thing that I knew to suit this area, this painful area that still felt the pain of the abuse. So this is really important because we can see how our traumas get stored in our physical body, but not only in our physical body, but also in our energetic body. The sexual abuse that I experienced triggered a deep hypersexuality in me. It's like I completely desacralized the act of sex, and I was looking for love through sex. And this was because I was initiated to sex through my neighbors that I considered as my brothers, and I really trusted them, and I thought they were actually showing their love through sex. So there was this deep distortion of sexuality and love because I never had a healthy relationship with love, because I grew up with parents who were really emotionally unavailable for me. I didn't receive actually this physical love. My basic needs as a child weren't met. I wasn't able to understand what was love because I haven't received this love. So my way to seek for love, because I had no idea of what love was through sex. So this is really important to notice because so many of us are confounding sex and love. There's a world between the two. It's really important to know how both are different and how they can exist together, but they're really, really, really different. And for a child, it's hard to understand. It's really important because by 14 years old, I was addicted to sex. I was masturbating 3 times to 4 times a day. I was watching porn. So it all started from this abuse. So there are 2 extreme paths that we can take when it comes to sexuality. We can be whether frigid or we can be hypersexual. And both are a trauma response. And both paths need to be addressed and seen for what they are. And for instance, you can experience hypersexuality at some point in your life, and later you can experience frigidity or vice versa. This process of healing is not linear. So there are so many things that can trigger us in so many ways and so many beautiful realizations that can come afterwards and showing us our patterns. So for instance, the first years of my life, I was really, really, really sexual, hypersexual. I was really craving sex and I really needed sex. It was part of my life. If I didn't have sex, I didn't feel good. And afterwards, after going to India and awakening to ancient traumas, I started to be really frigid, and I started to feel super uncomfortable with my sexuality, and I didn't want sex anymore. So this can happen too. It depends on your level of awareness and how you are living your patterns and how you are realizing your patterns and your own healing process. And our root chakra is our overall health, our vitality, our spiritual essence, our sense of self. So when our sexuality is off, when our sexuality is unbalanced, we are disconnected from our spiritual essence, from the essence of our power. So it's really important to heal our root chakra. And our root chakra defines as well the relationship we have with safety. Our root chakra is also our connection to our family, our connection to relationships. So you need to really question the role that you played in your family. Many people have played the role of a caregiver for their parents because their parents or one of their parents was mentally unstable or an alcoholic or a drug addict. So this is really detrimental in the life of a child because the child is not going through crucial developmental processes, stages that they need to go through in order to be a healthy individual. So if you have been a caregiver for your parents and if your basic needs weren't met, there's a great chance that you are suffering from toxic shame, that you are truly feeling like you were not deserving of your parents meeting your basic needs. And you can grow out feeling that inherently that there's something wrong with you, that you are defective, that you are flawed as a human being, because you are thinking that you are not deserving of your parents' love, or your parents' attention. And of course, if you didn't have this background, well, you can't bond in a healthy way with other people because it will always take you back to these memories and to these times where your needs weren't met, and realizing that the reason why your needs weren't met, it's because you were not good enough. So there's this deep feeling of unworthiness that can be created just out of a lack of this emotional structure. And of course, if you didn't have this emotional structure, this safety background, you never felt safe as a child, that you needed all the time to be on guard, that something could come up at any time and would affect you on all levels, on all dimensions, then you cannot be safe as an adult. You cannot feel safe in life. You cannot feel safe when it comes to finances, when it comes to your love life, when it comes to your relationships. You can't feel safe. So again, this is connected to this unbalance in our root chakra. And of course, you need to identify your own dysfunctional patterns, but you need to connect your own dysfunctional patterns to the dysfunctional patterns that have pre-existed before you in your family history. So if there was one of your grandma or one of your ancestors who suffered from mental illness, well, there's a big chance that you're gonna inherit a type of mental illness. To share about my own family history, the sister of my grandma in my mother's side committed suicide because she was mentally ill. And I tried to commit suicide at the age of 14 years old. And my mom was also suffering from mental illness. And I suffered from deep depression, anxiety, and also PTSD disorders. So these patterns are passed down from generation to generation until one individual decides to do the work. So it can be mental illness, it can be addiction to alcohol, drug addiction. And this can be from your mother lineage or your father lineage. And really, you can do this work yourself and start to connect the patterns, start to connect the dots. How is it connected to your own story? How is it connected to your patterns in this lifetime? And the patterns that you experience in this lifetime are actually cycles of trauma. So it's time for you to reclaim your true story and the true life you truly want to experience. Not the life of your parents, not the life of your ancestors that didn't heal and were still in this suffering. Now, right now, we are aware of our patterns, and as we are aware of our patterns, we can heal them and we can connect them and we can understand that at the end of the day, this was just part of a cycle and we are breaking this cycle. And from this explanation that I provided, I'm gonna now give you a journal prompt that you can do on your own. And this journal prompt is from my book, Trauma Healing, the Spiritual Approach, that I highly recommend you to read because it is a really vulnerable book and powerful book where I go deep into explaining my own patterns for you to understand your patterns, but also explaining how you can manage your trauma responses and now how you can navigate and go towards this place of embodiment. And now how can you practice to come from this place of totality and not from this wounded place. So you can find the information to purchase my book below this video. And I'm going to leave you with this journal prompt. So I truly encourage you to get into this place where you can reflect and really try to do this exercise without judgment and really feel into it, because this is a really powerful exercise and I'm sure that it will serve you to expand and to rise higher and higher, because you're going to understand things that you refuse to acknowledge, things that are really important for the future of your healing process.